Welcome back to our afternoon session, or sessions of the Restoration Torah Conference. The first speaker, I was just told that I ought to kind of rub it in to all of you out there in virtual land that you missed out on some amazing Cafe Rio salads. So, thank you to Boyd and Maria and Melissa for cooking all that food for us. It was delicious. So, yes, another round of applause for that. But if you didn't come today, then it's too late because tomorrow we just have sack lunches, so it's not gonna be as good. But yep. All right. So David Patrick is going to be our speaker, as I mentioned. He's going to talk to us about the mystery of the Shemitah. So, David, come on up here. Silence all your phones.
All right, awesome. It's really good to be here. So I got raise of hands, even out there in virtual world, raise your hand. Have you heard the word Shemitah before? So maybe about half. It's just so everybody knows how that response came. So today I'm hoping that you'll come away going, oh, that's what that is. And not only that, you'll go, oh, that's important. And I think you're gonna get that. Now, I don't know if you can read this. It says, the 3,000-year-old mystery that holds the secret of America's future, the world's future, and your future. So this is a summary of the book written under the same title by Jonathan Cahn. And here I am, age 53, doing a book report. Didn't think that would happen, but I'm excited to do it. It's a fascinating subject, so we're gonna dive in here. Why did I care about the mystery of the Shemitah? I'll explain. So this is what I thought. Now the Shemitah is, and I'll get more into depth. I'm gonna give a very brief overview of what it is. It's a 7-year cycle in which the Israelites were commanded when they were able to go into their promised land, that if they would let the ground lay fallow in the 7th year, in fact, they were commanded to let it lay fallow, and so they wouldn't prune their vineyards, they wouldn't plow their fields, they might do minor things, but the Lord would provide for them. Okay? But then I found out by some means, because I was listening to something on YouTube about the Shemitah in the book called The Harbinger, written by the same author, which I'll briefly bring up again. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is showing something about cycles of economies and markets. And guess what? I'm a financial advisor. I work in financial services. I own an insurance agency and a financial planning practice. This is my alley, okay? So I'm like, well, if I can know about these things, then what can I do? I can help grow wealth for my clients. I can preserve wealth for my clients, because if I know when things are going up or when things are going down because of these cycles, I can do something about it. I can protect or build. I could be slightly ahead of the talking heads. And wouldn't that be nice to be slightly ahead of the talking heads? And oh, what a guru I would be, right? You know, I'm being honest with you. It'd be nice if I could be that guru that could do that for clients, and then they'd come to me in droves, right? And it'd be nice just to know what links these markets and breaks these markets. And so here we go. What is the Shemitah? So you can find it in Leviticus 25. This is a picture of a rendering of Charlotte playing the shofar, and in Leviticus 25, so you know this is way back, right? I mean, this is when it started, way back when you got the law. And here's how it's defined. It's every 7th year, okay? And you might spell it Shemitah with a AH, 2 T's, or no I and no H, depending on where you go. But it's the same thing, okay? And it means release. So God is saying, every 7th year, you will release the land and let it lie fallow. I mean, you guys have probably you're some gardeners among us, I'm sure. And you know that you have to rotate crops, and you've heard all those things. Well, there's some science behind it besides just being an observable act that God wants you to do. Wikipedia and Chabad has something to say about it. So let me bring that up. The 7th year in the 7-year agricultural cycle, when the land is left to lie fallow, the Shemitah year waives all outstanding debts between Jewish debtors and creditors. Ooh. Let me read that last part again. The Shemitah year waives all outstanding debts between Jewish debtors and creditors. Okay, how would you like if all your debts were wiped free every 7 years? It's okay to raise your hand. Even if you don't have debts, it's okay. And wouldn't that be awesome? That's the structure that God set up for Israel, was a structure of economy that would not burden people for any too long. And you could have a growth and flourishing, and God would take care of you. All right, what does Wikipedia have to say? Pretty much the same thing. It's just a lot more words. And you can look it up really easily on there. They talk about a little bit more about the lands going back to the original owners, and you can't, it's all among the Israelites. It's not among Gentiles, okay? So it's all to keep it in-house, keep all your properties in-house. Think of a release, though. If you're having this day where you're getting all your debts forgiven, it's wiping the slate clean. How many of you would like a fresh, clean start, right? Or have ever wanted a fresh, clean start? I think we all have. And you're unburdening your neighbor as well. Okay, we'll come back to this a little bit more. So here's Jonathan Cahn. What's his story, right? So he wrote this book, The Harbinger, and I'm not going to go deep into that. You should check it out for yourself. It is a rehearsal. A harbinger is something that's kind of telling you of menacing things to come. It's a warning. And when he saw the things that happened with Twin Towers, he looked at Isaiah 9:10 and he said, whoa, there is a striking similarity here. And so that's where the book, The Harbinger, came out. And one of the chapters in The Harbinger was about the Shemitah. And his publisher said, I think this is really interesting. Why don't you do more on this? And so he started to dive in, and he goes, oh, there's so much more. And so now a whole book came out of it called The Mystery of the Shemitah. Okay? All right. To understand the Shemitah, you've got to understand the Jewish or Hebrew calendar. And the calendar is on a lunar calendar. So it's according to the moon cycle. And what I want to point out, if I can use this pointer, actually I can, yeah, let's do that. Right here is January and around to December, but the months in the Jewish calendar are different. So Nisan here, they're just different. And so it happens to be the religious observed calendar, and there's a civic observed calendar that's 6 months opposite. Is that confusing to anybody? Yeah, it is. So I want to show you another grid that kind of brings that into view. But now you can also see when all of the feasts and holidays are, right, on this calendar. It's nice, a nice visual for that. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Just remember that a new moon is dark moon. And when it first crescents out and you see 3 stars, then you've hit the new moon. Okay? And then it depends on whether you're in the southern hemisphere versus northern hemisphere. That might determine, you know, which way you're seeing a waxing or waning moon. As you can see the little chart there, and it's in your book, by the way, too, so you can look at that. Okay, so let's look at the calendar here. This first row, there we go, is the civic months. And over here's the Gregorian calendar, which we use now, which is our solar calendar, right? We go off the cycle of the sun, the earth and sun. And when you look at the civic calendar, which is what the Shemitah is based on, it's based on the civic calendar. And so the first month is Tishri, and the last month is Elul. And that's going to become important in a minute, which is why I wanted you to see and understand that. And Hebrew months will be either 29 days or 30, and you can actually see that right there, whether they are 29 or 30. But as you know, if you only have 29 or 30 days, you're going to come up short matching up to the solar calendar, right? So every 19 years, there are 7 months added to these calendars, like the 3rd, 6th, 8th, 9th, 11th, and 19th year, or something like that. They add an extra month in. And so by every 19th year, it kind of matches up again to the Gregorian calendar. And there's much more about that about agriculture, but, you know, save that for another day. All right. So just remember, Elul is the last month. And what's also important, very important, is it falls in the Gregorian calendar in August or September. So our end of the year is usually December, right? But not so in the Hebrew calendar. Okay. Deuteronomy 15, verses 1 and 2. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release, Shemitah, of debts. And this is the form of the release, Shemitah. Every creditor who has lent anything to his neighbor shall release, Shemitah, it. He shall not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release, Shemitah. So he only used Shemitah 4 times in that verse. I don't know. Might be important, right? I think he's crystal clear here. So there's one day that the release happens. You remember me saying the year of the release, but there's one day, and it's the very last day of the 7th year. And so that means Elul 29. Okay? Again, something I want you to remember, which is why I'm focusing on it. So, and I circled those items, civic month, Elul 29, falls in August and September, and it will become important in a minute. All right. How did the Israelites do with their Shemitah years? Okay. So here's Jeremiah the prophet and Lehi the prophet, and they were contemporaries. And there are spots in the Book of Mormon where it says, and they threw Jeremiah into prison. Right? So that's how we know that they were contemporaries. Did you know that Jeremiah was also a young prophet when he was called of the Lord? He's like, why are you calling me? I'm a young guy. It's all those older guys. They're supposed to do all that stuff. Right? All right. So here we go. This is what happened. 2 Chronicles 36, 15 through 19. And the Lord God of their fathers sent to them by his messengers. Messengers are the prophets, right? Just like Jeremiah and Lehi, Ezekiel's and Isaiah's of the world, because he had compassion on his people. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words and misused his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. They burnt the house of God and brake down the walls of Jerusalem and burnt all the palaces thereof with fire and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. What did Lehi and what did Jeremiah prophesy about? This very thing. And then to go on, verse 20 and 21, and them that had escaped from the sword, in other words, those that didn't die, carried he away to Babylon, where they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the king of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbaths, to fulfill 70 years. Okay, how long is 70 years? 70 years. So they were taken up captive into Babylon for 70 years. And it says until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. Okay, let's understand this. So this is the traverse, right? To get carried away captive into Babylon is to end up over here. And it happened between 586 and 516 BC. There are differing opinions on those years, but we'll go with that for illustration purposes. Okay. So, was this a surprise to the Israelites? It shouldn't have been, because Leviticus 25 talks about the Shemitah years. Leviticus 26 says this, and I will make your cities waste and bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. I will bring the land into desolation. I will scatter you among the heathen and will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate and your cities waste. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths as long as it lieth desolate, and ye be in your enemy's land. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. As long as it lieth desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths when ye dwelt upon it. Right after the Lord gave the revelation to Moses to write this, Moses continued to pen the covenant curse if you didn't do it. Okay? And that's what happened. Now, how this next slide, I think, is very mathematical, and hopefully you'll like it. So, every 7 years is a Shemitah year, right? And they were 70 years in exile. So 7 years times 70 years in exile is 490 years in total that the Israelites did not observe the Shemitah. That's a long time, right? And so that's why they got 70 years in exile. So there would be 1 year for every Shemitah year that they did not observe. Okay, so 490 years of broken law. So is God merciful? Or is God just? He's both, right? He does exactly what he says he's going to do. So, you're not going to observe my Shemitah? Okay, well, it's like we've tallied it up. 490, 70 years. Jeremiah, I'm going to give you a revelation, and you're going to tell the people it's going to be 70 years in exile, and that's exactly what he did. It's a wake-up call here. Okay. All right. You feel like you got a handle on the Shemitah now and how serious it is? Why don't we move to our present day, or close to our present day now? So here's our modern day. What do we in America have in common with Israel? I had to expand it out here because it was too hard to see there. What do we have in common? A couple things. Anybody of Israelite bloodline in this room or online? think you could claim that. Yeah. Have you ever had a patriarchal blessing and been told you were of Ephraim? I have. Yep. Has this nation been blessed? Has America, the United States of America, been blessed? Has it been protected? It has. Okay. Is the land of America a covenant land? Okay. Do any of those things have anything in common with Israel in Palestine? Yep. September 11th, 2001. I do remember where I was. Do you remember where you were? And I'm in financial services, okay? And so I was driving to work in my Ford pickup when I heard it on the radio, and then I got to work and I watched it on television. The market, that was a Tuesday. The markets, of course, Wall Street was shut down, right? Completely shut down. And it reopened again on September 17th, a Monday. Mondays are usually not good. If there's a bad day in the stock market, it's usually a Monday, just so you know. And they had the single greatest point loss in the Dow Jones Industrial Average of 685 points. I'm not going to go into great depth on what that means, but you know that means it was a bad day. A lot of money was lost. A lot. I had one particular client that I talked to. She was getting ready to retire, and then literally she and I had an appointment that week of September 11th, and we had not reallocated her money to anything. And then we had our appointment, and we immediately lost a big swath of money from her account. Terrible timing. I've changed the way I do things now because of that, but it happens, and it happened to real people in their accounts, not to mention the lives that were lost. What else? Tremendous insurance company payments went out. The aviation industry was changed overnight. Great losses there. If you've gone through security at an airport, you know it's completely different now than it used to be 20 years ago. All right, let's go into 2008. That was 2001. Now we're going to go to 2008. September 29th, another big day in the stock market, and not a good one. We lost 777 points that day in intraday trading, and the bond markets also dropped. Usually when stocks go down, bonds go up, but we were in the midst of a credit crisis, and bonds are credit. Keep it simple. And we had a housing bubble that burst because of it, because of loans that were defunct. We had over 3 million foreclosures that happened, and we ushered in the Great Recession. Okay? And that was some troubling financial times. In 2008, it was toward the tail end of that. In all of 2009, my phone would ring every week, and I didn't know who it was going to be. It was a client, and they would say to me, I need to cash out my IRA. I need to sell my stocks. I need to liquidate some of my annuity. I need to, because they weren't working, or they'd overextended their credit or something. There's somebody called every single week. Okay. What, is this a coincidence?
No.
September 17th, 2001. September 29th, 2008. Elul 29. Want to guess what the next one is going to be? Elul 29. Not just any Elul 29, because there's 7 Elul 29s every 7 years. But this is the one that happens every 7th year, the last day of the ShemitaH year that nullifies accounts, that wipes the slate clean. And so if God wanted to get your attention, what would he go after? Seven years, the Shemitah, the last day of the 7th or sabbatical year. Ding, 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 ding. Wake up. Wake up. And if this makes you feel uncomfortable, alarm clocks are meant to make you feel uncomfortable to wake you up, right? You should feel uncomfortable in this conversation. That was the past. We still have yet the future to go, right? So it's dangerous to prognosticate, though, unless you actually are a prophet, right? And Jonathan Cahn he was very careful not to say, well, for sure something's going to happen. This book was written, I should have said this earlier, this book was written in 2014. 2014. Let's do the math. 2008 plus 7 years is 2015. 14 and 15. So the ShemitaH year started back in 2007 and ended in September of 2008 when those things happened and the Great Recession started. And then 7 years later then would be 2015, would be the end of the ShemitaH year. And 2014 would be the beginning of it. So he wrote that during that time period, but he was careful to say, well, there's no guarantee that anything's going to happen. So, are you curious? And yes, God goes after your pocketbook and he goes after your security if he's going to wake you up. Have you felt your security over COVID-19 be somewhat challenged? Yeah. Does COVID-19 also affect your pocketbook, maybe? I mean, I live in southern Utah, and 2 hours drive from my house is Las Vegas, and there's only 400,000 people not working in casinos right now. 400,000. Okay. So, I'm reading this book in 2015, early in 2015, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be prepared, right? And I'm going, okay, so I've got the date figured out, right? I know it's ShemitaH year, so I gotta find me some money managers that I can work with so that we can manage some assets to preserve and protect or grow wealth during a downturn in the economy or the stock market. Now, can you make money if the stock market goes down? The answer is yes. Yes, you can. And so I found a money manager and we built a fund and we called it the Acro Fund, which is kind of short for acrophobia, the fear of falling. I thought that was kind of clever. They came up with the name. Well, I'm not going to take credit for that. But I said, these are the things I have on my mind, you guys. Are you with me? And they said, yes, we'll build a portfolio for that. And so we put things like gold in it, gold stocks. And we put things like shorting of commodities, oil and natural gas and things like that. So that if the markets went down, we would get an increase in the value of those assets in the fund. But our intention was to move the majority of the assets to a cash position and then allocate some of the money to the Acro Fund so that some money was just cash protected and other money was in the market. In the event that we had downturn, we could make money. And here's what happened. Now, this is I hope you can see it, but it's in your book also. I don't know if I'm going to try and slightly. adjust that? Oh, you tried? Okay, you did good. Okay. It's in your book, page 59. Okay, so what you're looking at is January to December of the year. And you can see I kind of created some crosshairs right here. And that was Elul. The market was actually closed on Elul 29. Whew, right? But the next day was a Monday. And that's what happened on that day. But you can see it was preceded. Does it have to happen on exactly on Elul 29? No, it doesn't. But that's the point of the Shemitah year. It's such a strong indicator. Even when before I knew about the Shemitah, before I read this book, before I had an inkling of the invisible hand of God and the covenant blessings and the covenant curses that comes with obeying, before I knew that, I already knew that my stock market moved in cycles, and it had about an every 7-year cycle. I already knew that. That wasn't news to Wall Street, okay? But the why was always like, I don't know, it's probably this. Okay, so here it is. You see the loss that the stock market suffered that year during that time period? It's fairly short-lived, only a couple months, and then it started to rebound, but it didn't end the year up. It still ended the year down. And the next slide I want to show you is part of the why this went down. Now, the next slide, the blue line is still the same Dow stocks. It's actually the same chart. Nothing's changed. It's just been adjusted to allow another stock ticker to be reflected in the value. And this particular stock ticker in red is oil. Oil. Okay? Price of oil. Do you remember this? The price of oil dropping, and you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to pay less for gas. It wasn't much less. It was less, but it wasn't much less. But it really spooked the markets. Whoops. And you see this really deep decline. And then it kind of levels off. And then the markets kind of restore again a bit. This is that dip we looked at a minute ago on the previous slide. And then it continued to go down and down and down and down. 46% loss that year. 46% loss in oil prices. Okay? And the Dow ended down 2%. So what do we learn from that? There's a couple quick thoughts. Low price of oil is good for a consumer, right? Don't squawk if the price of oil is low as a consumer. But as a seller of oil, it hurts. If you're in the oil industry, it hurts, right? And if the Shemitah is nullifying accounts and wiping away large sums of money, the oil and energy sector is one that took a monster beating that year, nearly a half of its value. And if you were in that, you lost almost half of your value that whole year. It's a huge nullification of accounts. Okay, this, and I'm sorry, okay, think of this like a Mormon pioneer quilt, okay, of assets in the stock market. And these are all different. You're going to have to look at it in your book because you can't see it very well here. But these are different asset classes. And I've got another one that's maybe a little bit more readable. I just thought I'd throw a few of them in here. But you can see in 2015, oh, you didn't get this one, did you? Sorry, guys, you don't have this one in it. But you can look these up online. It's called a Callan, C-A-L-L-A-N periodic chart, and you can pull it out. But you can see in 2015, and then you go back to 2018, and you go back to 2001, and you can see the decimation of the markets. And if you go back and you say, okay, well, what about the top 10 worst point losses in the market? How many of those were related to a Shemitah year? At what point do you say that this is beyond coincidence? Or what percentage do you comfortably say this is beyond coincidence if this percentage out of 10 is related to the Shemitah year? 30%? 40%? It was 70%. 70%. Does that make sense what I just said?
7 out of 10 of the top
point losses
were at the end of the Shemitah.
In a Shemitah year, not necessarily at the end of it, but most of them. Right. Yeah. Notwithstanding this last couple months, though. Okay. Because there were some big ones recently. Okay. There's that chart. Here's another one. This is a look at, this black line is 0. And these are the different categories in the market, bonds or real estate or international or small companies or large companies. And you can see below the line in 2015, there was quite a few, and there was a few that were above the line. But overall, it was mostly the commodities market got wiped out, especially energy market, like we talked about. This is one off a Canadian periodic table of investments, REITs, gold, stocks, bonds, cash. And this goes from 1972 through 2019. 2015, gold actually did okay, but guess what did the best? Real estate. And stocks did the worst. And in 2008, gold cranked 30%. 2001, gold made 7% and real estate made 22%. Interesting thing about gold, by the way, is gold is, you pull it out of the ground and you smelt it and it's now portable real estate. Just saying. Something to think about. Okay, this is Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Spain, Sweden, UK, and USA. And USA is the yellow one. And so in years 2000 and, where's 2008? 2008, down 37%. 37% loss in 2008 in the stock market. Okay. Does that sink in pretty well? That it's so beyond coincidence that we have to consider what's being said here. And, well, let's go on. The covenant blessing or curse on American soil. Does it really exist? Yep, I think it does. Here in Ether, chapter 2, verse 8, which we're reading about the Jaredites, which inhabited the land first, it reads, and he had sworn in his wrath unto the brother of Jared that whoso should possess this land of promise from that time henceforth and forever should serve him, the true and only God, or they should be swept off when the fullness of his wrath should come upon them. Second Nephi, so early in the Book of Mormon. chapter 1, verse 7. Wherefore this land is consecrated unto him whom he shall bring. And if it so be that they shall serve him according to the commandments which he hath given, it shall be a land of liberty unto them. Wherefore they shall never be brought down into captivity. If so, it shall be because of iniquity. For if iniquity shall abound, cursed shall be the land for their sakes, but unto the righteous it shall be blessed forever. Jonathan Cahn didn't put these in his book. I know you're not surprised by that. He's not of the Restoration movement. But he is a believer in Yeshua. And so he's a Messianic Jew. Now let's go to Alma 45. And he said, Thus saith the Lord God, Cursed shall be the land, yea, this land unto every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, unto destruction, which do wickedly, when they are fully ripe. And as I have said, so shall it be. For this is the cursing and the blessing of God upon the land. For the Lord cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. Is God merciful or is God just? All right, a little bit more to consider. How am I doing on time? Pretty good. About to the end. Okay. So a little bit more to consider here. Markets and economies we've talked about. Okay. Jonathan Cahn's book also talks about wars. And it also talks about towers. And one of the greatest towers that was ever built in New York was actually the Empire State Building. And it stood as the preeminent tall building, and it stood for a very long time as proof that America was dominant. Remember the tower that fell a long, long time ago, called the Tower of Babel? Remember that one? Until the Empire State Building was built, most tall buildings in the world were churches and cathedrals. And so you moved from a religious to a secular tower of height. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then the rise and fall of nations. In closing, I'd like to do one last story about the rise and fall of nations and a little bit about towers. So, let me get my notes out so I get this spot on. Okay. Jesus, the Messiah, he says to the people, if you don't repent, you're going to go into exile again. Right? And in 70 AD, they were taken captive again. And for 2,000 years, essentially, they were stripped of their homeland. Right? And the Romans overthrew them. And after the Romans, the Byzantine had them, and then Arabs had them, and then the Crusaders came along, and then after the Crusaders, the Muslims, and then after the Muslims, it was the Ottoman Turkish Empire. And about a month ago, I was flipping through channels on television, and I saw Lawrence of Arabia was on. I'm like, I haven't seen that for a long time. I'm going to watch this. So I watched it, and I'm like, and I'd forgotten the story about Lawrence of Arabia. And it's okay if you don't know it. I'll briefly tell it to you. It's a classic. You may want to watch it. He is a British soldier, and he rallies the Arabs to fight against the Turks that were in the land of Palestine. The Turks had controlled Palestine for 400 years. And so he rallies the Arabs, and then there's then what happens is this is the early 1900s, 1917. Turns out to be a Shemitah year, just saying. And you have a man named General Edmund Allenby. And Edmund Allenby ends up driving into, I got to stop. One more thing. The Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was something that Britain said, and they said, we want to make a place in Palestine for Israel, for Israelites, for the Jews. And we want to do anything we can to help that happen. And they made an official government declaration. And 1 month later, Edmund Allenby drove his forces into Jerusalem, didn't even have to fire a shot because the Turks vacated. They took off. They were scared. And they drove right into Jerusalem and were able to take Jerusalem. And that was 1917 and 18 in the Shemitah year. And fast forward 50 years. Have you heard of a Jubilee year? Okay, so the Jubilee year is also talked about in Leviticus 25. You should read it, it's awesome. But it says, after the 7 times 7 Shemitah years, you'll observe the next year as a Jubilee year. And the awesome thing about the Jubilee year is it's a time when you actually get all your lands back. So if I leased my property to somebody else, I would get it back in the Jubilee year. It would come back to me. All my own family homelands would be mine again if I was an Israelite in the land of Israel. So in 1917 and 18, when the Shemitah year happened, and they got the land of Jerusalem back, it could be, nobody can say for sure, a Jubilee year, because it was a year that Israel got access to Jerusalem, their holy land. Now, is it okay if we fast forward again? Let's go another 49 years, 7 times 7 Shemitahs, add a year for the Jubilee year to 50, and you get 1967. It's a pretty good year. I was born that year. And it was the year of the 6-Day War. I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but the 6-Day War, several Arab nations were saying, we're not going to let you have this land. And the Israelites said, yeah, the Jews said, yes, we are. And they basically went to war, and they fought hard. They fought hard, and they beat them in 6 days and basically took over Jerusalem. Okay? Could be a Jubilee year. It's one of those times when you get to reclaim land. And it was prophesied, and I didn't go into all the prophecies, but you can find the prophecies about them getting their land back. Is it okay if we go another 50 years into the future from 1967? So in December 6th of 2017, the year after the Shemitah years approximately, Donald Trump makes this declaration. He says, therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, their prime minister, said that was one of the top 4 events in their history as a recent nation. Happened in 50 years later, possibly the Jubilee year. I'm trying to give you overwhelming evidence, and I'm trying to nurture this thought among you. Okay, I did say I'd talk about one thing more about towers, okay? So the Empire State Building was a high tower for a long time. But then in 1971, Nixon took the US off the gold standard, okay? Also then in 1973, they opened the World Trade Center Twin Towers in 1973, okay? Now the next thing I have to say is fairly sad. Also in 1973, the Supreme Court sided in Roe v. Wade to allow abortions in this country. And you may recall from history or reading that Israel, when they sacrificed their children to Baal, the Lord cursed them. When we went off the gold standard and passed Roe v. Wade, and the World Trade Centers were open for business in 1973, same year as Roe v. Wade. Fast forward 28 years, those towers fell. Wake up, America. Wake up. We have got to understand that God is serious. He's going to get your attention one way or another. Why let it be the hard way? We have worship of people, celebrities, general authorities. I could keep going. We've got problems with debt. We've got all sorts of mistaken things that we're doing as Americans and as Israelites amongst this crowd and amongst our people that we persuade and are in circles with. We've got a lot of repenting to do. It's not time to say, oh, we're great. It's time to say, uh-oh, we've got to wake up and be aware and do something about it and get right with God. Because all I have to do is add another 7 years, and I don't know what the hand of God is going to do, right? We've just seen what happens with COVID-19, and it's messy business. Very messy business. So I don't want to see worse, and I don't want to see wars. And when I see the Twin Towers go down, I think that's God taking away the protection. Because that's what God does, is he protects those that serve him. And so and that's the wake-up call. We were not protected. So there's more than one way for that to happen. And I guess I'm pretty much to the end, and maybe you have questions, and throw them on up here. Joshua may have collected one or two. And we don't have much time left either, probably, but do you feel like the Shemitah is more in view now? Do you feel like you have a better grasp on it? Does it seem important? Does it seem essential to understand? Well, I hope so. I hope that was my goal today. And if you want to get a hold of me, then you can email me or call our mission number. I'm with Christ Church, the branch. I served an LDS mission to Japan, loved it. It was wonderful. But I've since joined Christ Church, where we continue to do temple work and using the old temple endowment sessions and those things, because we want to maintain these important things that God said is important. And so, not a commercial there, but I wanted you to have some background and perspective. So if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to talk with you. I don't really want to debate in the sense of argument, but I'll happily debate and collaborate and share and have conversation and discussion. So thank you very much.
Are there any other questions while we gather up? But here's a few for me.
Are there any regions, economies, countries in the world today that observe the Shemitah years and forgive debts? How about the modern nation of Israel? Yes, apparently some do. Some devout Jews do still do that, which is great. Good question. I like this. So, are the 7 years of Shemitah being produced by Jewish bankers that are evil, possibly even Satan worshipers? Maybe. Maybe. But I will say this. You remember hearing in Scripture, in Isaiah, how God said, I will raise up and I will level, and I will raise up somebody to take you down if you don't listen. Well, I think the hand of God is very powerful, and it is unseen, and it is not, I mean, we can't fathom the persuasion power of God's hand. Remember, even when Christ was being brought in front of Pilate, Pilate's own wife had a dream. And her dream was, that guy's a good guy. You should have nothing to do with him that's bad. And that was a high state official's wife. And so Pilate had a warning. God can do whatever he wants to do, and he can get into people's hearts and minds, pocketbooks, security. He's all powerful. Remember that. And this must be from Andrew, because he said, you blew my mind. And Joshua, I think you're going to be happy to hear this, but the book is already hit a new level, because when I went in the bathroom, there was a book in there, so it's already a bathroom book. All right, I'm done. Thanks, everybody.